The smell hit me before I saw her. Pine resin and something burnt, like a torch left too long against wet wood. I was moving through the tree line at the edge of Widow Creek, checking the snares I'd set 2 nights before, when that smell stopped me cold. Not smoke from a fire. Something else, something wrong. My horse couldn't have felt it too. She pulled her head left, ears flat, breath coming short. I held the rein tight and listened. Nothing. Then a sound. So small I thought at first it was a rabbit caught in one of the snares. A kind of whimpering, low, ragged, like someone trying not to make noise and failing at it. I dismounted slow. The pines were thick here, crowded together the way they get in the low valleys where the soil stays damp. I moved between them, my moccasins quiet on the needled ground, and pushed through a cluster of low branches. And I stopped. She was sitting against the base of a big ponderosa, her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself. She wasn't moving. I thought for half a second she was dead. Then she flinched, just slightly, and I knew she'd heard me come through the branches. She didn't look up. She couldn't, I think. The tar was everywhere, black and thick and dried now in places, cracked along her shoulders and jaw, still sticky looking in the hollows behind her ears. There were feathers stuck in it, white ones, gray ones, pin feathers from a chicken by the look of them, matted into her hair, pressed against her neck, down the front of what had once been a dress. The dress itself was torn, half shredded, and beneath the tar where the fabric had been ripped away, I could see her skin was red, burned. My jaw tightened. I knew what this was. I'd heard of it, seen the aftermath of it once before. A man, a horse thief, they said, though I never believed it. The town would work itself up into something ugly. They'd find a target, someone who didn't have anyone to stand for them. And then they'd do this. She was maybe 30 years old, maybe younger. It was hard to tell beneath the tar. Her hair, where it wasn't matted, was dark brown. Her hands were scraped raw, the knuckles bloody, and I could see by the tracks in the dirt that she'd crawled here. A long way, maybe. The tracks came from the east, from the direction of Calver's Crossing. 6 miles of crawling. I crouched down low so I wasn't standing over her. I know what it does to a person, to look up at someone when you're already on the ground. "I'm not going to hurt you," I said. "Nothing. My name is Chayton. I'm camped about 2 miles north of here. I have water. I have medicine." Still nothing, but her breathing changed. It got more controlled. She was listening. "I'm going to sit here for a minute," I said. "You don't have to do anything," and I sat. Right there on the pine needles, cross-legged, maybe 8 feet from her. I didn't look directly at her. I looked at the trees. I watched a woodpecker working at a dead branch about 40 feet up. I listened to Keone shifting her weight behind me. After a while, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15, I heard her voice. It was cracked and dry, like she hadn't used it in a long time, or like she'd been screaming it raw not long before. "They'll come back," she said. "Who?" "The men from town. They said if I was still in the county by morning they'd—" She stopped, swallowed. "They said they'd finish it." I looked at her then. She was looking at me, or trying to. One of her eyes was swollen nearly shut. The other was dark gray or maybe green. It was hard to tell in the pine shadow. It was steady, though. Even through all of it, that eye was steady. "What county?" I said. "Briar County, Calver's Crossing." I nodded slowly. "You're not in Briar County anymore. You crossed the creek. This is territory land." She blinked. Something moved in her face. Not relief yet. Not quite. More like the very first edge of it. Like when clouds shift and you get 1 second of sun before they close again. "My name is Claire," she said. "Claire Aldous." "Chayton," I said again. "Standing Elk, if you want the full of it." She looked at me a long moment. I could see her taking stock. The way people do when they're calculating whether a new danger is worse than the one they're already in. I'm used to that look. I didn't take offense at it. A woman alone in the pines with tar hardening on her skin doesn't have room to be reckless. "Can you stand?" I said. She tried. I saw the determination in it. She planted her hands, pushed up, and her legs gave on the first attempt. She sat back hard against the ponderosa, and her breath came through her teeth sharp. "Don't," I said. I stood up, moved to her slowly, crouched again so we were level. "I'll carry you to the horse." Something in her face went rigid. Pride or fear or both. "I can walk." "I know you can," I said, "but you don't have to." That seemed to land differently than I meant it to. She looked at me for a long moment, and her one good eye filled up. Not spilling over, just filling, and she pressed her lips together hard. "All right," she said quietly. "All right then." I lifted her carefully. She was lighter than she should have been, not in a way that came from smallness but from hunger. I could feel the sharpness of her shoulder blades through the ruin of her dress, the way her ribs pressed against my arm. She'd been lean before whatever happened in Calver's Crossing. Now she was something past lean. She held herself stiff at first, the way people do when they're embarrassed to be held. Like they think they're imposing. Koan-ha was good. She stood still while I got Claire settled in front of me in the saddle, and she moved easy once I gave her the knee. We rode north in silence for a while. What did they say you did? I asked. Not because I needed to know, but because it helps, saying a thing out loud in daylight to someone who isn't going to flinch from it. She was quiet for a moment. There was a man named Gerald Holt, she said. He owns the bank in Calver's Crossing. He wanted to buy my father's land. My land my father passed in February. I wouldn't sell. He said the price was fair. I said no, he said. She paused. He said he'd make it so nobody would want to do business with me anyway. I didn't think he meant. She stopped again. I should have left sooner. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Men like Gerald Holt don't need reasons. They need someone to make an example of. And they need the town to be scared enough not to ask questions. The tar and feathers, that's not punishment. That's theater. That's meant to be watched. How long ago, I said. Last night, it was near dark. There were, I don't know, maybe 12 of them. 12, in the dark, against one woman alone. My jaw tightened again and I made myself let it go. Anger was useful in its place. This wasn't the place for it. Right now, the only useful thing was getting Claire Aldous warm and clean and safe. My camp was in a bowl of land between two ridgelines. Good shelter from wind, hidden from any trail, with a spring that ran cold and clear year-round. I'd been camped here 3 weeks while I scouted the eastern boundary of our territory. Alone, which I preferred. My people were further west. I'd told them I'd be back before the first frost. I got the fire built up and set water to heat, 3 pots of it, which was more than I'd ever heated at once. But I could see what the cleaning was going to take. Claire sat near the fire, still holding herself. The heat was already working on the tar, softening the dried edges of it. I could see it now more clearly in the firelight, and it was worse than I'd thought. Along her jaw and neck, where the tar had sat hottest, the skin beneath was blistered. I had bear grease and a poultice my mother had taught me, willow bark and yarrow, good for burns. I had clean cloth. I had what I needed. This is going to take a while, I told her. And it's going to hurt some. I want to be honest with you about that. She nodded, set her chin. I worked from the edges inward, the way you have to. The tar had to be softened first with warm water, and then, carefully, slowly, worked away from the skin beneath it without pulling. I used a smooth stone I'd had since I was a boy, rubbed flat by the creek for the edges. I used my hands for the rest. She made small sounds. She tried not to. Once, when I got to the worst of it along her left shoulder where the blistering was deepest, she grabbed the edge of my blanket with both hands and held on, and her whole body went rigid, and she didn't cry out. She just held on. You can make noise, I told her. There's nobody here. I know, she said tightly. Old habit, I thought about that. Thought about what it meant, to learn to be quiet about pain. To make it a habit. That kind of silence doesn't come from one night. That takes years of practice. I kept working. Her hair was the hardest part. The tar was deepest there, layered, and some of it I couldn't fully clear without cutting, so I did. With my hunting knife very carefully, taking only what had to go. She had good hair. Thick and dark and probably quite long before. What was left of it fell just past her jaw. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be, she said. It'll grow. By the time I was done, the fire had burned down twice and I'd rebuilt it both times. The sky had gone from black to that deep dark blue that comes just before gray, and Claire Aldous sat by the fire wrapped in my second blanket, her skin treated and bandaged where it needed bandaging, her hair damp, her face, for the first time since I'd found her, visible. She had a good face. Strong jaw, straight nose, a scar through the left eyebrow that had been there long before last night. She looked at the fire with the expression of someone who isn't seeing the fire, who is somewhere else entirely. Checking through rooms in her mind, taking inventory. I set a pan of cornmeal to cook and sliced some dried deer meat into it. After a while she said, "Why did you do that?" I glanced at her. "Which part? Any of it? All of it?" She looked at me directly. "You don't know me." "No," I said. "I'm a white woman, alone, in the middle of the night with..." She gestured at herself. "All of this." "Yes," I said. "So why?" I turned the meat in the pan and thought about how to say it simply. "Because you needed help and I was there," I said. "That's most of it. The rest of it..." I paused. "I have a sister. She's younger than you, married now, 2 children. But there was a time when she was alone and in danger and far from people who would stand for her. A farmer found her. He was a white man. He didn't know her. He didn't have any reason, but he helped her anyway. I looked at the fire. I've been paying that debt ever since." Claire was quiet for a long moment. What was her name, she said. Your sister, Winona. Is she all right now, Winona? She is, I said. She's good. Something in Claire's face softened. Not collapsed, softened. There's a difference. Collapsed is when the fight goes out. Softened is when a person lets something in. Good, she said quietly. That's good. She slept most of the day. I let her have the bedroll and slept sitting up against a tree, which I've done before and don't mind. Around midday she woke, ate, didn't say much, slept again. Her body was doing what bodies do when they've been through something bad. Closing down, conserving, healing. I read the territory and checked the snares and thought about what came next. She had land. Or she'd had land. I didn't know what Hult had done with it while she was gone, and I didn't know what kind of legal ground she stood on. And frankly, the law in Briar County was about as useful to her as a screen door on a riverbank. But she had something. She had the deed, she'd said, tucked in her boot. She'd thought to take it when she ran. That told me something about her. When she woke the second time, the sun was getting low, and the light was coming through the pines in long orange bars. She sat up and looked around. That quick, sharp look of someone who doesn't know for a moment where they are. Then she remembered, and her shoulders came down out of her ears. Still here, I said. Still here, she agreed. She looked down at her hands. Clean now, the knuckles washed, the scrapes bandaged neatly. She turned them over, front and back, like she was checking that they were hers. I used to have a ranch, she said. Not sad exactly. More like she was just letting herself say it out loud. Small one. 30 acres, little more. My father built the house. He built it well. Good timber, stone foundation, the kind of place that lasts. She paused. I was going to keep horses. That was the plan. What kind of horses? She looked up, slightly surprised, like she hadn't expected the question. Quarter horses, mostly. For working cattle. And, this is going to sound foolish. Say it. A Frisian. One Frisian. Just for I don't know. For the sheer beauty of having one. A small smile crossed her face. The first one I'd seen. It changed her whole face, that smile. My father thought I was insane. He said Frisians were hay-burners and show-offs, and we'd do fine without one. He wasn't entirely wrong, I said. She laughed. A real one. Short, surprised. No, he wasn't entirely wrong. We stayed 2 more days, not because either of us planned it exactly. It was more that she wasn't ready to leave. And I wasn't willing to push her toward a road before she had her legs under her. I knew where she could go. I knew a woman, a widow named Bess Harker, who ran a boarding house in Sweetwater, 2 counties west of Briar, who was fair and quiet and asked no questions. I'd send Claire there. Give her a letter for Bess, some provisions for the road. But not yet. On the second evening she found my drawing things. I kept a small leather roll of them, charcoal sticks, and a few pieces of smooth paper, and she held them up with a look of genuine curiosity. You draw? I said. May I? I nodded. She sat near the fire and drew for a long time. I watched, not intrusively, just the way you watch someone do something they're good at. Her hand was certain. She didn't sketch tentatively, didn't second guess, she just drew. When she finished, she held it out to me. It was a horse, a Frisian, or her idea of one, anyway. Massive and proud, with the long, heavy mane they carry, the feathered feet. She'd caught something in it. The aliveness of it. The sheer absurd, glorious excess of a horse built like that. I looked at it a long time. You've seen one, I said, once. At a fair in Missouri when I was 12. I stood in front of its pen for 2 hours, and my mother had to come find me. She was quiet for a moment. I've been chasing that horse ever since. I thought about what to say. Said the only true thing I had. You'll have one, I told her. It'll take time, but you'll get back to your land, or you'll find other land, and you'll build it again. And you'll have your Frisian. She looked at me for a moment, and something complicated moved across her face. You sound very certain, she said. I am, I said. I've been watching you for 2 days. You're not the kind of person who lets a Gerald Holt be the end of her story. The complicated thing in her face shifted into something quieter. Something like being seen and not minding it. I'm not, she said softly. No, I agreed. You're not. On the morning of the 3rd day, I saddled Konane and we rode south together, which was out of my way, until we reached the Sweetwater Road. I'd written the letter for Bess Harker and given Claire a pouch of dried provisions and what money I had in camp. Not much, but enough to get her there and a few weeks beyond. We stopped where the road forked. I got down and helped her down. She was still sore, still moved carefully, favored her left side, but she stood steady. She stood looking at the road for a moment, and then she looked at me. I don't know how to do this, she said. Thank you for this. You don't have to do anything with it, I said. Just go get your land back. A short breath, half laugh, half something else. Chayton Standing Elk, she said, like she was placing the name somewhere safe. I'm going to remember that name. Claire Aldous, I said, I'll remember yours. She stood looking at me for just a moment longer. Then she stepped forward and put her arms around me, carefully because her shoulder was still healing and held on. I put my arms around her. She was small against my chest. Or maybe she just seemed small, the way people seem small when they finally let themselves stop fighting for one moment. She'd been holding herself together for 3 days with sheer nerve, and for just this 1 minute she let it down. I held her. Not tight, gentle. The way you hold something you want to stay whole. After a while she took a slow breath, let it out, and stepped back. Squared her shoulders. That chin came up. She had the look of a woman getting ready to ride into something hard, and knowing it, and going anyway. She took the road south without looking back. I watched her until she crested the first rise and went over it. Then I stood there a moment longer, at the empty road, at the place where she'd been. That was 18 months ago. Last spring, I rode into Sweetwater on a trading matter. And Bess Harker came out of her boarding house with a letter she'd been holding for me. She said she'd figured I'd pass through eventually. I opened it right there in the street. It was short. Got the land back. Took 3 lawyers and 9 months, and I won't put down on paper what I think of Gerald Hoult. But I got it. House is standing. Stone foundation held. I found a horse. His name is Chayton. Thank you for everything. Come see us when you're in Bryan County. You're always welcome here. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my coat pocket against my chest. I stood in the middle of Sweetwater's one real street, in the spring light, surrounded by wagons and noise and the ordinary business of people living their lives, and I smiled. Just like that. She'd gotten her Frisian, and she'd named him after me.